Hello, BookTube. By 8 a.m. this morning, I was under the strong impression that I deserved a treat. I had a very, very busy night, busy evening and a busy night. And by the time the clouds were clearing this morning, when dawn was coming up, of course, I didn't do anything at dawn because a certain someone is not a morning person at all. So it takes hours for her to stretch and yawn and work her way up to feeling like she wants to go outside and survey her kingdom. But by the time 8 o'clock rolled around, I had pretty much psyched myself up for a treat. And I bet you can guess what kind of a treat that was. I went to the Brattle Bookshop in Boston. Those of you who are new to the channel, it's a great used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston. It's 3 stories. The 3rd floor is rare and collectible books, so I almost never go up there. But the 1st and 2nd floor are books on every category under the sun except for romance. And tons of them, double stacked on most shelves, reasonably priced, with constant turnover. First thing you see when you walk in the door, aside from the whiteboard with the monthly question, is the pricing table, where all of the books are coming in, where all of the new stuff is either coming through the door or coming up from the basement to be priced and disseminated. And, you know, a 3-story great used bookstore that's packed full of stuff would be great anyway, but the Brattle also has a sale lot next door. They don't just have a couple of sale carts outside. They have a lot that's the floor space of another bookstore, of another shop. It's full of carts and bookshelves, thousands of books out there, arranged in no way whatsoever other than price. $1, $3, or $5. I tend to spend most of my time out in the sale lot. I mean, books come and go, and there's no reason for me to be going to the Brattle. Anyway, I get books in the mail. I get books free in the mail. There's no reason at all. So the last thing I want to do is anger the gods by shopping inside the store. I go in, I say hi to everybody, and I also make the rounds. I just walk all around the aisles. It's always pleasant to do that. But I do most of my active shopping out in the sale lot. And I did that this morning, and I got a pile of books that I want to show you. And we can see whether or not BookTube guided some of those books. You'll see that it did. So it's a special announcement in the middle of this video. A special announcement for a BookTube event. I'll have to put that in the title like a real BookTuber. But anyway, we'll start off with the, I think, one of the only paperbacks that I got was guided by BookTube, because coming up in August, in just a few days, just a week, is Garb August, the very worst BookTube event of them all, where you are encouraged, nay demanded, to read trash in the month of August. So naturally, I don't ever go to the Brattle with a shopping list. That's a deadly idea. But naturally, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, you know, if you see something that looks like trash, definitely grab it. And I found something that looks like trash by an author who wrote trash for a living, and a very good living, and is completely forgotten now. And isn't that a good thing? Don't we want to forget the people who wrote trash? Don't we want to do that? The author is Edmund Schittel, and the book is Good Time Coming. And there she is, lounging on the bed. What she got on the nightstand? Chocolates, little wines, flowers. The new shocker by Edmund Schittel, with the cover screaming at you, more than all his other novels, this one goes to the limit. So I wasn't sure. I could pretty much tell from this cover, but I wasn't sure that this was trash. So I read a little bit about it on the inside. Anson Paris, 33, Harvard-bred, a successful publisher, married to the right girl, father of a beautiful child, and owner of a gracious home in Connecticut. He's doomed. His career was soaring, his marriage outwardly happy, his sex life normal. In air quotes. He's definitely doomed. A secure, confident individual until the devastating realization that he was capable of abhorrent acts of homosexuality and of enjoying them. It's the abhorrent acts that you most enjoy, sweetheart. Okay. Then we have another cast member, Gailey Burnham, whose libidinous desires ran rampant through the pages of his novels and his life. A man who lives simply for the orgasm and the power it gave him. I think if that's true of me, then the power is out. And then there's Neil Eith, Neile, and then the last name Eythe. Anagram much? A liberated girl novelist, and with the looks and attitude of an underground superstar who came from Denver to experience all New York had to offer. And New York was offering different kinds of new highs, new sensations, and Anson Paris, who's happily married and is also indulging in, what was it again? Abhorrent acts of homosexuality. So where does she fit in? I don't know, and I can't wait to find out. So I've got a classic piece of garbage. I don't believe, if I vaguely remember this author, I don't believe this was his best-selling book at all. I think he had one that sold 10 times better than all the rest of his books. But I only found the one. Believe you me, if I'd seen more, I would have grabbed them. But this is the call that Garb August has on us for August. And there's a bunch of other BookTube stuff in here. But this next one is a Modern Library volume. I love this author, so I grabbed it. This is the Daniel Boorstin Reader. And this has a publicity sheet in it from Random House from 30 years ago. This is a collection of his work with excerpts from The American Experience and all sorts of other stuff, plus shorter works of his. I grabbed it because I grabbed it because I don't have it, and I love these modern library versions, and also I thought it was kind of neat that there's still a Random House sell sheet in here. But there's also a review in here. This is, it doesn't actually say, I believe this is the Wall Street Journal. And there's an old yellowed review of this book by Max Boot, who was just a kid back here in 1996. And he wasn't the only one who was just a kid, because that is little George Stephanopoulos. Considering that these are, stick up the ass stencils instead of anything else, I'm assuming that this is the Wall Street Journal. They haven't changed. They'll never stencil me. But this, I want this anyway, and it's actually a contender on the list. On any Brattle sale haul, there's always a question of what's going to make it onto the list immediately. For tonight, I intend to read everything that I get, or reread everything that I get. But there's always a question in my mind of, when I'm done with all this, when I'm done examining all of these things, what's going to make it onto the pile for the night's reading? And the Boorstin Reader, I don't know about all of it, but it is a strong candidate. And it's also a placeholder, because I really want the trade paperback of The American Experience in a box set. I had that once upon a time. He did a 3-volume thing called The American Experience. I want that, and I want it in trade paperback in a box set. God knows if I'll ever see it again, but this will do just fine. Then we have a little hardcover. I grab these whenever I see them, and I made the mistake for years of grabbing paperbacks, but I reread these so often that the paperbacks don't last. So I've had to be very careful and just watch for hardcovers. I found a hardcover of Giovanni Guareschi's Comrade Don Camillo. Any Don Camillo books that I see, I grab. There's a small handful of absolutely gem-perfect escapist literature in the 20th century. And by escapist, I mean not only away from the annoying modern world, but into another world that never changes, that's always perfect, that's always the way you want it to be. Think of the Mapp and Lucia novels by E.F. Benson. Think of, P.G. Wodehouse. The country houses of P.G. Wodehouse. Think about number 3 Equity Court for Rumpel of the Bailey. Same is true here in this little village somewhere in the Po Valley, where in the years after World War II, the village is ruled over by 2 men who have a lot more in common than they would ever willingly admit. There's the communist mayor, Peponi, who's gigantic and beefy and a thug. And then there's the priest. There's Don Camillo, who is also gigantic and has hands like shovels, just like Peponi, and who's just as hard-headed, and who views his charge as his spiritual flock. And these two are constantly butting heads with each other. But they're constantly butting heads with each other, but you kind of sort of think that they like each other. And certainly they are perfectly willing to help each other whenever outside forces happen to come in and make trouble in the village. Their rivalry is delightful, absolutely delightful. Well, in this book, in one of the main stories in this book, Perpone wins a lottery, but he's a communist. so he's on the one hand, this is great, this great windfall of money, but on the other hand, yeah, I'll be on dicey footing with the comrades. But all throughout these stories, whether it's Little World, Don Camillo, or any of the others, this one I'll put a cover on this and gladly reread it. In all the stories running throughout them, the most charming thing in here, for me, the element that I like the most, is that Don Camillo will often confer with Jesus on the big crucifix over the altar in his church. Jesus will often talk to him. And it's wonderful. Those exchanges are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, the rest of the book is funny, too. There's slapstick humor. There's great over-the-top, exaggerated dialogue and whatnot. But those quiet moments, Jesus never gives Don Camillo any slack. If Don Camillo is doing something wrong, he will hear about it from Jesus, definitely. And I had a big collection of these things. There was a big omnibus volume, probably 40 years ago, something like that. I think it coincided with maybe a BBC production of Don Camillo. And I don't have that anthology anymore. I haven't seen it in forever. I have never seen it. Other than the copy I had, I've never seen it. So I grab these things whenever I see them. So I was happy to find Comrade Don Camillo. Then we have this next one is for, like a lot of books here in this pile, is for BookTube at War, a BookTube event that's premiering this year here in July. Reading military-related stuff, fiction, nonfiction, fantasy, science fiction, whatever you want for military-related stuff. I found an anthology that I really like the look of. This came out from the folks at Pegasus Books, I think just shortly before I got back into book reviewing, so I never got a copy from them. This is edited by Pete Ayrton, and it's called No Man's Land. It's a collection of World War I fiction. And I'm sure that one of the things I love about anthologies like this, it's a big, thick thing. One of the things I love about anthologies like this is that they always introduce me to writers that I didn't know about, haven't experienced, and once I encounter them in cheek by jowl with other authors in an anthology like this, I suddenly want to hunt them out and find them. So I look forward to that. That, at least parts of that, will almost certainly be on tonight's reading. Maybe not the whole thing. Then this next one, those of you purists out there, you book care purists have been at me for years to stop reinforcing the dust jackets of my hardcovers with clear plastic packing tape. And I didn't see any trouble with that. I still don't see any trouble with that. But I care about my imaginary BookTube friends, and I didn't want the handful of you who were having coronaries every time I did that to keep having coronaries. So I looked into it, and it turns out that buying a roll of plastic book covers, of archival plastic book covers on Amazon, is easy. It's easy to do. And they're easy to install. And it's cheap. It's like $11 for a roll of 10 or something like that. So I did that, and I practiced doing it, and then I did it again. Now I just make sure that I have a little roll of those covers ready at all times, so that I don't ever have to think about. I will still reinforce my paperbacks with clear plastic packing tape, because there's nothing that can be done about that. I need a dust jacket. I need a detachable dust jacket to use the plastic coverings that I buy on Amazon. And nobody cares about mass market paperbacks anyway. But this one, I grabbed it because I have not seen it in forever. I don't think I've read this thing since it originally came out. I wasn't going to leave it, but it's in terrible shape, and I don't know if it's even in good enough shape to use one of those plastic coverings on. I might just read this until it falls apart and wait to find a better copy. This is by the journalist Jules Witcover, who I'm assuming is dead. But every time I mention that on this channel, someone will tell me that I'm wrong, and that the person is 130 years old and living their best life or whatever. But this is The Resurrection of Richard Nixon, his big book on Nixon's political life. up to a certain point. I think, if I remember correctly, this thing stops when Nixon is elected president. But it takes you through Nixon's presidential campaign against Hubert Humphrey, among many others. I've just seen the inside of that campaign from a different angle with a new book about Hubert Humphrey, but wasn't concentrating on this, and no one writes better than Jules Woodcover does about American politics of his day. Almost nobody does it better than him. And this was one of his very earliest books. I don't remember exactly. I think he wrote a book about RFK Sr., not the crazy anti-Semite, but RFK Sr. I think he wrote a book about RFK Sr.'s presidential campaign. He was deeply involved in that, knew it backwards and forwards, knew the Kennedy family, had all sorts of access, and was in the room when JFK was shot. I think that book may have been his first book. Been in columns, done all sorts of deadline work before that. I think that was his first book, and this might have been his second book. It's certainly very early on in his writing career, and I wish that we're in better shape. The original owner of this used paper clips as bookmarks, and there is some marginalia, but it's very light and it's very graceful. I don't care if someone's written in the book, if they're minding me, if they're minding their posterity, but they want to remember where they were, they want to remind themselves of what they found interesting. I'm perfectly happy to follow in the wake of such a person. I don't know that I'm going to live with the paper clips. I'll probably take all of those out. But this is in terrible shape. It's sun-bleached. It's ripped all to hell. I'll read it, definitely. I haven't read it since, when did this come out? I should probably say. This came out in the early 1970s. 1970. I think that's the last time I read this. And now, for a long time, I had a sort of a visceral reaction against Nixon books, reading new ones or rereading them. I read them all. But there was a kind of a gut revulsion that has eased a little, because Richard Nixon is now the second worst president in United States history, not the worst president in United States history. It just my luck that at 28 I've lived long enough to see both of those presidencies. But now it's not that hard a thing. I am still going to be the very first and loudest dog on the chain to bark at any book that wants to rehabilitate this monster. And there is one of those coming up later this year. But this isn't trying to do this. This is just Woodcover doing what he did so well, which is to get down into the guts of the day-to-day politics of the time. Get on the phone, find out what the poll workers are saying, the census takers are saying, the political hacks are saying, digest their campaign trail press releases, but compare them against those things against reality. This will probably be really, I'm not having any real clear recollections of what I thought about it the first time. I don't think I wrote about it anywhere. So it could just be a real fresh read. I just wish it were in better shape. I would happily keep this, but I don't think it's going to last. I'll take the dust jacket off it to read it. Maybe that will help. Anyway, this next one, we have seen something like this before on this channel, but not exactly this. This is The American Seasons by Edwin Way Teale. I love this author, and I have a paperback that is, I think, called A Walk Through the Year. That's very similar to this. Edwin Way Teale wrote, he traveled America with his wife to experience what used to be the 4 seasons of the calendar of the year in North America. There used to be 4 seasons: a summer, autumn, winter, and spring. And Edwin Way Teale wrote a book about each of those seasons. And they were enormously popular, but they were also honored. I think one of them, I want to say winter, won the Pulitzer Prize, or the National Book Award, or something like that. But those, I have said before on this channel, not that anyone's paying attention, I am waiting to find hardcover copies of each one of those. A Walk in the Winter, A Walk in Spring, A Walk in Summer, A Walk in Fall. I'm waiting to find hardcover copies with dust jackets of all 4 of those. I will. Sooner or later, the Brattle will provide. Someone has that set, and they can't live forever. And I want that, definitely. But in the meantime, these things lent themselves to this, which is to take bits and pieces from all 4 books and put them in one big book. I have a paperback called A Walk Through the Year, I think it's called, that does that, and then this does that. And I haven't checked yet. I'll have to find A Walk Through the Year and check. I don't know if these are actually the same thing, if they're the same book, just with a different title for the paperback. This was done by this was done by Edward Mayfield himself. So A Walk Through the Year was definitely not. It doesn't matter anyway. If this is even slightly different, I will gladly take it. This author has a weird place in my heart, in a way that a lot of you, if you're younger, won't have experienced. I read all of this author's books one by one. I've read them. I've found them secondhand to reread them. I've studied them and pored over them. I've gone to them when I needed a buck up of his particular no-nonsense prose, and I have loved them. All of them. He wrote a memoir called Dune Boy. He wrote a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of books. It wasn't just the Four Seasons books that I read. It was everything. He wrote a book on bees, for Pete's sake, that I loved. I have a lot of them here, and he is completely gone. And that adds to the special relationship that I'm talking about. I have loved all of his books. I've read everything that this author's written. And he's completely gone. No one's ever going to reprint Edwin Wakefield. No one ever reads him. No one knows anything about him. That adds to the special feeling. That really does. So I'm very happy to have this. I'm going to have to see. I'll have to dig around. Do you want to go up, baby? See your fans. I'll have to dig around and see. I'll have to find A Walk Through the Year and see how it's different from this thing. But I'm on board either way. Then we have, we'll go back to BookTube at War, a BookTube event, BookTube at War, all about military literature. I have 3 books here to show you. And one of them is a special event for BookTube at War. So aren't you glad that you got all this way through the video? We're reading BookTube at War, reading military literature for the month of July. Any military literature that you read, whether it's romance or horror or science fiction, fantasy, memoir, poetry, whatever it is. If you read something military connected, you are reading BookTube at War. But what's a BookTube event without a giveaway? And that's what I found. I grabbed this thing specifically so I could give it away, because I already have a copy. This is Stephen Pressfield's novel, Gates of Fire. His historical novel about the Battle of Thermopylae, that you will all know from the great movie 500. This is in beautiful condition. It's a brand new hardcover, the wonderful cover design there. And this is a giveaway. I already have a copy, and I love this book. Absolutely love it. So if you live in the lower 48 of the continental United States, so not Alaska, not Hawaii, and nowhere else, nowhere overseas, nowhere across a border, nothing like that. Because if you live across a border, if you live outside of the continental United States and you give me your address, it will be wrong. You will give me a wrong address. You will give me an incomplete address. And I will spend $75 to mail a package nowhere. It will never reach you. You will recontact me in 2 months and say, I never got that. And I'll say, well, this is the address I sent it to. And you'll look at that address and you'll write back and say, oh, yeah, I left out this vital piece of information. Oh, sorry about that. Try again. Since I'm not going to do that, since I'm not going to eat rage like that, instead it will be the lower 48. If you want a copy of Gates of Fire for a special BookTube at War giveaway, you just let me know. It'll be first come, first serve. Then the other 2 books that I found for BookTube at War are on the same subject. And they're a little bit primed because the book that I read last night for BookTube at War was about the American Revolution. So the Battle of Kings Mountain, which is absolutely pivotal in the southern theater of the American Revolution, but also in the American Revolution just in general. And that whetted my appetite, definitely. I haven't been doing any themed reading for BookTube at War. But although I think, I've said on this channel many, many times that I consider World War II to be the greatest military subject of all time. I think it's the greatest war that was ever fought. The greatest, the biggest, the most expensive, the most all-encompassing, the most horrifying. The starkest in terms of good and evil. that's ever been fought by the human race. I think it's no real coincidence that's the last of its kind that's ever been fought. From its beginning to the entry of the entry of the United States to its ending, I consider it one of the grandest subjects in the human narrative history. And it's still in living memory. There's still people alive who remember it. But although I think that about World War II, it's not the American war that I know best by a long shot. I've read a lot about World War II. I'd like to think I'm pretty conversant on it. But the American Revolution is the war in America that I know best. Just to put it mildly. To put it mildly. And of course, the American Revolution is a publishing industry on its own. There are a dozen books every year. And almost every year, there is at least one big, one-volume history. I don't know that there is one this year, but Rick Atkinson is still plugging away on a trilogy about the American Revolution. He's done one already, and then the second one's coming out, I think, next year. But there have been plenty. And I've had them all, I've read them all, I've written about a lot of them, and then they somehow managed to migrate out of my collection. I found two today that I intend to reread, either for BookTube at War or this summer, and keep this time around. The first one is Theodore Draper. This is A Struggle for Power. Remember the days when American books had terrible, ugly covers? I do too. Yeah, it's amazing. This is really good, really, really heavyweight scholarly stuff, but still meant for a general audience. Same thing with this next one, Benson Bobrick, Angel in the Whirlwind. I think this book is just terrific. Absolutely love it. And I had both of these things when they came out. Struggle for Power came out, let's see, 1996. So I don't think I wrote about that at all. Benson Bobrick, I'm pretty sure that I wrote about. So this is you're probably later. Oh no, 1997. All right, so very glad to have both of those, and they are inviting for a reread. And then we'll finish up with Alan Massey, an author that I really like, who I want to say is certainly dead, but one of you will certainly prove that he's not. One of you will say, no, he's not only still alive, he's in the room with me right now. But he wrote a nonfiction work years and years and years ago called Byron's Travels, with an introduction by Elizabeth Longford, who did she's done a lot of really good biographies. Her biography, her 2-volume biography of the Duke of Wellington is amazing. And her biography of Queen Victoria isn't bad either. And this is a book about all the traveling that Byron did, some of it involuntary, and of course some of it voluntary and fatal. And I don't think I've ever read this. I've read a lot by Alan Massey, but not nearly all of it. I think Alan Massey wrote a kind of biography / literary consideration of Muriel Spark. If he's the one I have in mind and he wrote that, what I wouldn't give to find that at the Brattle. I will, sooner or later. I don't know if I'm giving that impression to the newcomers, but sooner or later you see everything at the Brattle. But I found this, and of course, Byron. I don't need any prompting at all to get another Byron book. I have lots and lots of them. So that was it. That was my Treat to Myself Brattle Bookshop haul here. We have Byron's Travels. We have 2 books in the American Revolution, Angel in the Whirlwind and A Struggle for Power. I'm surprised that these were all out in the bargain lot. I'm surprised I didn't see John Ferling's book. John Ferling wrote a book called, I think, Almost a Miracle. It's very similar to these two. They'd have made a great trio to get at the same time, but I didn't see it out there. We have Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield, which is a BookTube at War giveaway. What's a BookTube event without a giveaway? Then we have The American Seasons, an abridgment of Edwin Wayteel's 4 books on what used to be the 4 seasons. We used to have a distinct autumn, a distinct winter, a distinct spring, and a distinct summer. I know that's going to seem weird now in 2023, where we have, 9 months of summer, 1 month of fire, and the rest is rain. We don't have a winter anymore. Boston hasn't had a killing frost in 6 years, something like that. We barely have an autumn, as I'm sure that you've noticed. It goes from summer to winter with no interval. But once upon a time, they were so distinct that you could actually plan on them and take a car out to drive around in them. And then I have The Resurrection of Richard Nixon, which I'm very glad to have. I just wish I'd found a better copy. No Man's Land, an anthology of World War I fiction. Comrade Don Camillo. I'll just put a cover on that and add it to my steadily growing collection of little Don Camillo hardcovers. The Daniel Boorstin Reader, which was a review copy for somebody. And finally, Good Time Coming, a piece of garbage that's so perfect for Garb August that I expected that when I opened up the back cover, I would see a picture of Ollie going, it's just perfect for Garb August. So I'll just put that on the pile. That will not be for tonight. I'm obviously going to read it for Garb August. As to what I'll actually read tonight, I don't really know. It's not always predictable. For all I know, it could be Gates of Fire all over again for a BookTube at War. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. This was so much fun. This treat to myself was just what I needed. It was just what I needed. So I'm glad I did it. Don't know when I'll do it again, but when I do, I will take you along. Thank you, BookTube.